In this lesson, we are going to cover topic 5.2.1, also known as food security and sustainability. Research shows that by the year of 2050, the human population will surge about to 10 billion people. And while it may seem like a lot, humans still need food, and everyone needs food. And this is what food security refers to. Food security is just the physical and economical availability of food. And this just means that people have good and clear access to healthy food. And getting access to this food actually enables a balanced diet, which actually leads people to have a healthy lifestyle. However, if we look at the lack of food security, in many countries it is actually quite high. For example, if we look at Europe, the lack of food security, which means that people don't have access to food that allows them to have a healthy life and a balanced diet. This lack of food security in Europe is mostly between 0 and 10%. However, if we look at countries that are not in Europe and some countries in Asia and also countries in Africa, we see that countries like South Sudan and Congo and Afghanistan have actually lack of food security between 80 to 90%. So to put this into context, what does this percentage even mean? This means that in South Sudan, Congo and Afghanistan, about 80 to 90% of people lack food security, which means that they don't have physical and economical access to food, which means that they can't have a healthy and balanced diet, and they can't have a healthy lifestyle as well. So let's talk about the Green Revolution as well, also known as the third agricultural revolution. So in the 1950s, the population actually grew very much in a small matter of time, meaning that the population surged and there was a lot of new food that was needed. However, at that time, also technology was something that surged very fastly, meaning that agriculture was made more easier. This means that crop yields grew massively. If you don't know what the word crop yield means, it just means that the output per land increased. For example, if before the third agricultural revolution or the Green Revolution, let's say that per 1 hectare of land you could produce 10,000 corn cobs. However, after the Green Revolution, the same area of land you could produce now 20,000. This means that the crop yield increased, therefore meaning that humans could produce more harvest in that same land that they had before. So how did they actually increase the crop yield? First of all, scientists started producing seeds that were more genetically modified, meaning that seeds that could survive in more harsher conditions, that needed less water, and that produced more than other seed variants. Then they also started using fertilizers and pesticides. If you are wondering what they are, fertilizers are just basically substances that are filled with NPK. And pesticides are just substances that kill bad organisms. So I'll just put organism killer. And they use these in order to actually increase, because supplying NPK to the plants and seeds, it actually produced more harvest. And pesticides, well, they killed all bad organisms that prevented fast growth as well. And they also developed irrigation software. This just means that they produced better ways to transport water to the seeds, and actually because of this they could use less water and they could produce more output from them. So there are also criticisms of the Green Revolution. First of all, when I talked about pesticides, as I talked that they killed the organisms that were bad. However, they also killed the good organisms. So what this means is that when they used pesticides on the plants, they wanted to kill all the bad organisms that would eat them and destroy plant growth. However, in the dirt there are also a lot of good organisms that support plant growth as well. So using pesticides, they actually kill the good organisms that support plant growth as well. So fertilizers had actually two main problems. The first word is this very difficult word, which is called eutrophication. This just means that when they supplied NPK to the water, then actually supplying more nitrogen to the water actually removes the oxygen from the water. So you can always understand that eutrophication just means that when fertilizers are used, a lot of the fertilizer ends up in the water, and this actually removes oxygen from the water. And the second problem with fertilizers is that producing fertilizers produces GHG, which is also known as the greenhouse gases, and they increase air pollution as well. So you can always know that, because obviously producing them means that you need to use stuff. So obviously producing them requires GHG, as factories actually produce a lot of greenhouse gases, and they increase air pollution as well, because producing them is actually quite difficult. And also another criticism of the Green Revolution is that they brought out very many social problems as well. And the main one is actually that the tribes were evicted in order to produce more harvest. So a lot of tribes in America were actually kicked out of their tribes, in that sense, in order to produce more harvest, because they believed that with the new methods like fertilizer, pesticides and better seeds, they could produce more than the tribe itself. So let's talk about food sustainability as well. So there are actually many factors affecting food sustainability. So obviously diet is one of the biggest factors which affects food sustainability, and this means that people actually in India, they about 30% to 40% of them are vegetarian. And why Nüüd. So one of the biggest factors of food sustainability is actually the diet that people consume, as a lot of people know that actually eating meat produces way more methane and GHG. And producing meat is actually, and the reason why eating meat produces way more methane and GHG is because producing the meat actually requires a lot of minerals as well. If you start to think about it, let's say that when you feed your cows, in that sense, it actually releases a lot of GHG as well, as they emit methane as well. And then being on a more vegetarian type diet is actually way more sustainable. So let's talk about food loss and food waste as well. Food loss actually refers to the loss of food while producing it. So yeah, I think it actually is very clear what it is, but examples could be like, let's say that you are a milk farmer, and a lot of the milk you produce expires. That's actually one very great example of food loss, meaning that although you do the food, it still expires. And however, food waste actually refers to something way more different. Food waste refers to all the wasted food in consumption. So examples of this could be, for instance, that let's say food expires in your home that you forgot to eat. You could buy maybe too much food and forget about it, and then it also expires. And I think the best example for this would be that food expires in your home because you didn't like it. So, what are the main strategies to improve terrestrial food system sustainability as well? Well, the first one should be reducing demand for unsustainable foods. So what does that mean? There are actually very many great examples how to do this. People can develop more sustainable alternatives for meat, as meat is one of the most sustaining foods. As meat is one of the worst foods for sustainability. This could be one. Then also promoting eating more of a vegetarian diet. And the third one could be that just taxing less sustainable foods in store. So as you can see, obviously, like the end goal would be to promote less of meat consumption in order for farmers not needing to produce it as much, and we could move on more over to more sustainable food, and also maybe even meat alternatives in that case. So reducing food waste and food loss is something that is a bit more complicated. That's why I have conducted a very good scheme for you to understand how each part of the human sector or the sector of the society can reduce food loss and food waste. So obviously farmers and producers, they can use better technology that actually loses less food during the process of harvesting. This can be better technology that doesn't that harvests food that when it's actually complete, meaning that you don't harvest rotten food that is needed to be thrown out. For example, more sustainable crops. For example, some crops actually need less water and less chemicals, meaning that they could potentially produce less GHG and less methane. So the processors refers to all the cars who process all the stuff, like all of the food trucks that deal with processing and bring the food actually to the store. Well, what they could do is actually just have better packaging, because about 5% of all eggs that are transported to retailers are actually destroyed, meaning that if the processors used better packaging, less of food would be destroyed in the process. Retailers refers just to the stores that actually sell all the food. Well, what they can just do is discount food that is approaching its expiry, so people would actually buy the food faster and not leave a lot of food to be rotten. For example, many supermarkets, when the clock passes 9 o'clock, they actually discount all the pastries in the store. So let's talk about consumers as well. Obviously, they're mostly the ones who produce the food waste, not the food loss. And the main way how they could reduce food waste would be just to avoid over purchasing. This means that they could plan their meals ahead, because about 17% of all food that is actually bought is also wasted as well. And government can also help reduce food loss and food waste by passing laws forbidding retail food waste, meaning that supporting that all food in the store actually gets bought before it expires. And also food bank is also a very great reducer of food waste, because they distribute excess food, meaning that they can actually use the food that is actually coming more close to expiry. And also reducing transport emissions. This means that people should support more locally grown food and not support food that is grown over half of the. So reducing transport emissions means just that people should support more locally grown food. What this means is just that people shouldn't buy all of their vegetables and meat that is harvested over 5 transports and across from another continent, meaning that as less food is transported, the more we sustain the world in that sense. Because obviously transporting all of these food produces greenhouse gases and pollutes the air as well. Then increasing productivity. What this means is that people should just focus more on maybe traditional farming methods as well. I think this is something that we will learn on 5.2.2, and reduce and just using other methods to grow food that aren't damaging the environment as well. So reducing greenhouse gas emissions, this is meant morely for the producers of the food. So how can they do that? Well, first of all, nitrogen management is something that every farmer can do. This just means that farmers make sure that they don't oversupply nitrogen to the crops, meaning that there is no eutrophication, which we talked about before as well. Using new varieties of crops that sustain the environment more. For example, there are very many new alternatives like low methane rice. This means that there is just rice that produces less methane, however it's almost the same thing. Then supplements. This is mostly meant for the cows and the pigs and all the animals. This is just food supplements given to them in order to decrease the food, in order to decrease the methane that they produce. So ensuring environmental justice is actually a very important topic in ESS as well. So how can we do this in order to actually sustain the environment as well? Of course, we have to have equitable access to land and seeds, meaning that farmers have a lot of different options to produce and actually produce in a way that helps the world and helps the environment as well. Then all stakeholders in decision making. This means that if companies want to produce, for example, in a tribe in Brazil, they have to have very good opinions from everyone as well to make sure that this producing is actually good for everyone. And improving market access for small farmers as well. This means that retail stores shouldn't have a lot of monopoly in them, meaning that smaller farmers who actually want to produce more high quality stuff with sustaining the environment more also have market access in retail stores as well, because as people want to promote more sustainable foods, obviously they will give a chance to the small farmers as well. And that's it for this lesson. Thank you.